a large-scale war is no longer unthinkable. Mr. Yermak, where are we militarily in this war today, and how would you define victory?
In those 8 years, the world order shattered, the political map was legally changed. We keep hearing calls for capitulation for the sake of the peace in Europe. Negotiations, also called territorial disputes, are proposed. Ukraine does not have any territorial dispute with Russia. Our sovereignty and territorial integrity are not subject of the compromise. Therefore, there is only one way to prevent the war in Ukraine from escalating into continental and even world war. Help Ukraine win. Our goal is to stop history from repeating and prepare the future for the sovereign and free Ukraine. Russia has badly damaged our economy, and we can't put enough money into defense in the coming years. So we'll need annual financial help for reconstruction purposes, as well as we financing the security and defense. First of all, I mean it's about Ukraine joining the European Union as soon as possible. I need to emphasize, we don't think we so-called alternative formats of the integration are acceptable here. When it comes to security guarantees for ourselves, we are not asking.
Victory in your eyes is not a full ceasefire. It's Russian troops leaving Ukrainian territory, full stop. Is that right? Is that how you would describe victory?
And of course, for us, it's the victory. It's not just ceasefire. We are waiting for our victory, and I'm absolutely sure that we win.
Secretary General, let's start with you. How do you see NATO getting involved in this conflict, if at all?
And actually, NATO allies have supported Ukraine for many years, since 2014, helped to train thousands of Ukrainian troops. But NATO will not be part of the conflict, will not send NATO troops into Ukraine. Second, we have, of course, increased our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. Now we have 40,000 troops on the NATO command, and we have more than 100,000 troops on heightened alert. The purpose is not to provoke conflict, but is to prevent conflict, preserve peace.
But Secretary General, so when you look at what kind of security arrangements are needed to secure peace in Ukraine, what do those look like?
And the strongest way of providing support is actually to do what they're asking for, and that is to deliver weapons. And then the issue of NATO membership is further down the road.
Prime Minister, what do you see as the most important thing in terms of a common defense strategy in Europe right now?
If we invest in a well-developed defense, it should be also a way of training part of our population. Security is not just defense. We have to have a much more holistic view of this. That if we want to stabilize Europe, we also have to have a much broader view than only the defense part.
Because they are not fighting only for their freedom, in the first place, of course, but they are fighting. This is the war of one autocracy towards democracy. They are fighting for the democratic values, for all of us. And if Putin somehow succeeds in winning this war, then it's not going to be only Ukraine.
And how much can your country and allies keep on sending to Ukraine?
Ukraine is very good at articulating very precisely what is needed, and in that way provide them with really complex, advanced weapon systems that is very much needed in the war itself. So because Ukraine now has to sort of backfill their own military equipment, because they also used old Soviet Russian equipment. They can, of course, not replace it by Russian equipment. So they have to get stuff from our countries, also to build on their military infrastructure. So that's really costly. But we have to step it up.
Now give the Ukrainians on the bilateral basis whatever they want, because this is the critical period of the war.
President Putin tried to close the door to NATO. Then actually Finland and Sweden decided to move in. Because as late as in December this year, President Putin proposed a legally binding treaty for NATO, because in that treaty, it was stated clearly that there was no more NATO enlargement whatsoever. And then, of course, he wanted less NATO military presence on his borders. He's getting the opposite. He's getting more NATO presence on its borders, more troops, more forces. And then there will be more NATO members. And Turkey is key just because of its geographic strategic location, bordering Iraq and Syria. And of course, when you look at the war in Ukraine, the Black Sea, you realize the importance of Turkey. Turkey matters for the whole alliance.
Given the fact that the funds are limited, we've just gone through COVID, so there's been a lot of fiscal spending, and debt is mounting.
That's true. I mean, what is important is that if we do these military investments, is that the return of those investments is as high as possible. With also a component in basically also dealing with climate change. I mean, we will be confronted with the impacts of climate change in the years to come in a much more drastic way. Actually, some of the defense investments could help with this. It's this moment of crisis that as a European Union, we take steps forward.
So you have to look at the future. So at the same time, with climate change, these are the choices that you have to make. And sometimes it means raising taxes, being smart, because we also have our budgetary rules.
Is the best way to prevent a NATO-Russia war to ensure Russia is defeated, or is it to ensure that Russia has an off-ramp? So diplomatic negotiations, or are we beyond that?
I think the best way to prevent this from escalating, again, it's for Putin to stop the war. If that's not the case, then the best way to act is for us to be very firm. NATO is by far the strongest military alliance in the world. 50% of the world's military might and 50% of the world's economic might. We need to support Ukraine to help them reach a result on the battlefield that makes it possible for them to agree on the negotiating table. This war will most likely end at the negotiating table. The question is how and when. And that's the reason why it's not either support the military or be in favor of a negotiated solution. A negotiated solution, which is possible to accept for Ukraine, will only be achieved if they have a strong military position on the battlefield.
It could be much more of a challenge than we're talking about here, if this drags on again for years.
Yes, it's very difficult to predict this, of course. None of us know exactly what is going to happen, but it's one of the scenarios that we have to take very seriously, is that this can go on for years. The sanctions are hurting them, and we have to push that even further, I think, and to make them pay for this war in every way that we can.
I mean, the impact of the sanctions is really, it's a thorough impact. The 6 packages there is going to go much further. And then besides the sanctions, all European countries are making irreversible choices related to energy supply. And the impact of that takes time. But in the years to come, this is going to have a profound impact on the exchange with Russia.
To be too dependent on Russian gas is dangerous. That's the brutal reality. It has a price to wean off Russian gas, but we have to do it. This is about energy, it's about technology, and it's about also controlling critical infrastructure in Europe.
What we need to do to achieve peace and security. Mr. Yermak, let me start off with you.
And every day, Ukraine continue fighting, but we continue lost our people. And of course, as soon as possible, we need to receive all necessary weapons. It means that if we receive everything, we will win. We stop this war in central of the Europe. As we are talking for the long perspective, it's time to thinking together and to build new, strong system.
I think from the beginning we've said unity is our strongest weapon, so we have to stay united. If we stay united, I'm confident we can keep on helping Ukraine with the weapons, humanitarian aid, financial aid, everything they need. And the second thing I'd like to say, I think this has been a wake-up call for the European Union in a geopolitical sense. And I think we have to use that momentum to build on a stronger European defense within NATO and within the European Union.
Secretary General?
Well, my main message is that the Ukrainian war has reminded us of the importance of North America and Europe standing together.
Ensure the support of our domestic population. I think we are in for a somewhat longer period of instability, which means that we need to make sure that our North American, European populations are supporting us, which means that we need to protect them for the impact of what is happening. If we don't protect them well, we might lose domestic support and it might become much harder.